is in crisis. And people are looking for hope and answers. Thai PBS World is there with you with the best minds of the day. Join us on Thai PBS World tonight, every weekdays at 7 p.m. Thai PBS World, we bring Thailand to the world. สวัสดีค่ะ Very good evening and welcome to Thai PBS World Tonight. I'm Nad Bunag.
I'm Tulip Nak Sompopla and we will start the news tonight with what's happening yesterday at the protest. You know that the day gather started at about 4 p.m. at the Democracy Monument and then they start moving since around 5 to 6 p.m. Then they said they're going to head to the Grand Palace to submit the letter to the king. So yesterday, the protesters at the Bangkok's Democracy Monument were asked to bring letters for the king. The protest called on King Mahawachiralongkorn to reach out for dialogue and said that their three demands are the utmost compromise. Protests since July have increasingly called for reforms to the monarchy, the removal of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha and a new constitution. The Reuters said that these protests are breaking a long-standing taboo against criticizing the institution. The police told in a news conference that the public gatherings were banned within 150 meters of royal buildings. Barricades and razor wire were installed at several locations before dawn in preparation. In the early afternoon, several dozen royalists also gathered on the other side of the Democracy Monument wearing yellow shirts in the color of the king and waving Thai flags. Many held up pictures of the king and his late father, King Bhumibol Adulyadej. Around 6 p.m., the protesters started to march towards the Grand Palace. The police briefly tried using high-pressure water jets to hold them back, which police said later that did not contain any chemical contaminants. In the crowd, you see a group of monks and novices joined the demonstration, saying that they hope for Sangha Supreme Council of Thailand will also be reformed. They said that it is dictatorial. So just before 7 p.m., the police asked to negotiate. The protesters then sent Chonticha Jangrel and Gorakot Sang Yen Phum to talk, while the crowd waited in Sanam Luang. Negotiations went on for over an hour before the protest leaders read aloud their letter to His Majesty the King and asked the protesters to drop their letters in the prepared post boxes before going home. The Erawan Medical Center reports 5 injured from the protest, one of which is a police officer. Monarchists see the student-led protesters' demands for reform to the institution as a way of getting rid of it entirely. Although the protesters, if you ask them, they always said that that is not their goal. They just want to reform, just to modernize it. The protesters seek to put the king more clearly under the constitution and reversing changes he made shortly after taking the throne. Reuters said that the royal palace, of course, was not available for comment. It has not commented since the start of the protest. But the king said a week ago that protesters were still loved and that Thailand was a land of compromise.
So that was what happened yesterday with the protest. And one thing that we all remember, apart from the water cannons spraying water at people, but another memorable part was the red post boxes that were there at the protest site, right?
Yes, there were 4 red post boxes that they asked the protester to drop the letter to the king in that boxes, though they didn't say how it's going to be delivered. But they said these are for the king. So the Deputy Metropolitan Police Bureau Commissioner, Police Major General Piyat Tawichai, said that the letters and the 4 red post boxes from the protest are in police position at Chana Songkram Police Station. And whether anyone will be charged for writing those letters depends on whether the content violates any law. He also said that regarding what seems to have been a smoke bomb thrown at the protest site yesterday, the matter is still under investigation. Regarding the use of water cannon against the protesters, Piya said that everything was done accordingly to the rule of law. The water cannons were used after a warning was issued not to approach the police front line. The water was shot in a spray, not directly at the protesters. He said, and it did not contain any chemicals. Piya said that the protest yesterday was in violation of the Public Gathering Act. The protesters did not submit a request seeking permission to hold the demonstration. The police are investigating and gathering evidence and witnesses before making a decision whether to charge anyone with an offense. He added that the protest yesterday covered the jurisdiction of 4 different police stations, Nang Leung, Chana Songkram, Samran Rat, and Parachawang. So it was a big area to cover.
And as we all know that Joe Biden has won the presidential elections after much anticipation throughout the week. So I guess everyone has been waiting for the results throughout for a couple of days.
I think it's quite official now because everybody now call him the president-elect.
Definitely. But back in 2016, Joe Biden actually visited the Thai embassy to sign a book of condolences for the late great king Bhumibol Adulyadej. And this set of photos have been released again today. VOA Thai re-released a set of photos of Joe Biden, who was then the vice president for Barack Obama, signing a book of condolences at the Thai embassy in Washington, D.C. to mourn the passing of the late great king Bhumibol Adulyadej on October 18, 2016. He wrote on behalf of President Barack Obama and the people of the United States, "I offer my deepest condolences to the Thai people and the royal family on the passing of His Majesty King Bhumibol Adulyadej. In 7 decades, His Majesty the King strengthened the friendship between our 2 nations. He was a tireless advocate for the Thai people and a valued ally of the United States." So this is the set of photos that VOA Thai has re-released today after Joe Biden has won the presidential elections a couple of days ago with 279 electoral votes, defeating incumbent President Donald Trump.
So Thailand-US actually has a very long relationship. President Obama was also visited Thailand too. It's one in the, I think almost every president tried to make their way here, except for the latest one.
Except for the latest one.
The latest one, I think Donald Trump doesn't really, the Obama policy was pivot Asia.
Right.
But President Trump, he didn't pivot to Asia. So, he didn't come around this area that much.
And if we all remember last year's ASEAN summit, he sent someone else.
Yes.
And that was a bit of a moment that people didn't really like because many people expected that President Trump would have attended, or at least he would have sent Mike Pence, who was the vice president. And this time around, we will have to see whether President-elect Joe Biden or Kamala Harris would visit Thailand during the 4 years.
But next year and this year everything has been pretty strange because of the pandemic.
Definitely. And moving on to the news of the first local transmission of COVID-19 in Thailand. And the first transmission was actually an Indian man working in Krabi province. And so far, health investigators managed to identify up to 290 people who've been in contact with this person. Dr. Opat Karngawinpong, Director General of the Disease Control Department, said yesterday that health investigators managed to identify 290 people who had been in contact with an Indian man working in a restaurant in the southern province of Krabi, who was found to be infected with COVID-19. Out of the 290 people, 79 people were categorized as being at high risk. For the low-risk group included 129 passengers on a flight from Phuket to Chiang Mai on October 30th and another flight from Chiang Mai to Phuket on November 2nd. Dr. Opat said that most of the 290 people were not tested for COVID-19 because they were classified at low risk. But they were told to monitor themselves for development of any symptoms and to see a doctor immediately. People who are classified as high risk have been tested for the virus and have been quarantined are actually in quarantine for 14 days. As for the recent travel history of the infected Indian man, as you're seeing right now, he traveled by car to Phuket for sightseeing and stayed at a hotel in Patong Beach, where he also met up with an American friend at a restaurant opposite of the hotel in Patong Beach. He later flew to Chiang Mai and traveled to Sukhothai province before returning to Chiang Mai again.
It's a very busy man.
Definitely, and he traveled to a lot of provinces in such a very short time. And when he actually showed symptoms of coughing is when he flew back to Phuket. And then before returning to Krabi, where he has been working in a restaurant. And this is the second half of his travel history. As you can see that he traveled from Chiang Mai and then back to Phuket and then back to Krabi. And he found out that he got infected with COVID-19 on November 5th. And on the 6th, he was then admitted to Krabi Hospital. So this is more of a detailed travel history of the infected Indian man, who is also the first local transmission in a couple months.
Yeah, that's why it became a big news.
Definitely, and it did scare a lot of people, especially people in the area as well, because some people don't even know whether they've been in close contact with that person or not. And meanwhile, Thailand recorded 3 new cases of COVID-19 today, bringing the total number of infections to 3,840, with 7 new recoveries and no new fatalities.
Talking about Thailand, we were mentioning Sukhothai, Chiang Mai, Phuket, Krabi. Those are very popular tourist destinations in Thailand. And right now, Thai economy is facing very difficult time because our economy depends so much on tourism. So today, the former president of Thailand Hotels Association, Supawan Thanom Kietipoom, proposed to the government to reconsider the travel bubble as a way to help revive tourism. She said that there is a demand in the Chinese tourist market to travel to Thailand, but the Chinese government still does not allow tour companies to operate abroad. The only way she thinks to help tourism in Thailand is for the Thai government to enter a direct dialogue with their Chinese counterparts. Last week, Pipat Ratchakit Prakan, Tourism and Sports Minister, said during the press briefing that the ministry is planning to welcome Chinese tourists as the first group of foreign tourists entering Thailand without a mandatory quarantine during the Lunar New Year. Without a mandatory quarantine. Pipat said that the travel bubble will focus on the provinces that have been COVID-free for 150 days. He added that he hopes the government will approve the plan before January 1st, saying that this will be a gift to Thailand, to be a guideline to revive Thai economy. And last Friday, Thai Public Health Ministry revealed a list of low-risk countries proposed to the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, or CCSA. The list includes China, Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea, etc. Visitors from these countries have to be quarantined for 10 days only, shorter than the current mandatory 14 days. So for the provinces that will welcome these visitors will be those where the local people accept the idea. Initially, there are 10 provinces, including Chonburi and Buriram. Provinces which join the program have to be well prepared and able to provide quarantine facilities and medical services as needed. Recently, Thai cabinet approved a project to develop human resources for tourism. So you can see now that they are trying very hard to revive this industry. They said that the project will help to cope with the new normal way of travel. With a budget of almost 67 million baht. The project started in October and will run until September next year, hoping to be able to train around 12,000 individuals in popular tourism provinces in Thailand. And earlier this month, in related news, Hong Kong's Financial Secretary Paul Chan said in the TV interview with CNBC channel that there are ongoing discussions with countries including Thailand and Japan to enter a travel bubble with Hong Kong.
So it seems like the travel bubble is still up in the air for Thailand because there is a big risk whether if we accept these tourists, we might see a resurgence of COVID-19 or play a risk of not having a travel bubble but see the economy slow down because Thailand, as we know, we tend to rely on tourism for the boost of the economies.
But right now we have the Chinese tourists, the first group that entered Thailand with a special tourist visa, and I think that will be some kind of test run to welcome more tourists later. And if there is no super spreader event later, I'm sure that the government probably will consider opening more to foreign tourists.
So we'll see how it goes. And just so you know, these are the stories we've also been following. Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha has sent a letter of congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris after their election victory over incumbent President Donald Trump. He also wrote that the Thai government is looking forward to working closely with the U.S. administration to enhance further cooperation between the two countries at all levels. The Election Commission has been asked by political activist Sisuwanjanya to investigate the conduct of the Progressive Movement Group led by Thanathorn Jungruengruengkit. Sisuwan accuses the group of functioning like a political party, which is a violation of Section 111 of the Political Party Act. A conviction for violation of Section 111 is liable to 3 years imprisonment and/or a fine up to 60,000 baht, while the founders of political groups found to be functioning like a party will face a political ban of up to 5 years. Air pollution has returned to Bangkok and its vicinity, with 71 air quality stations across the capital showing readings of 27 to 52 micrograms of PM 2.5 dust particles per cubic meter of air. Fine dust particles smaller than 2.5 micrometers in diameter or PM 2.5 can be easily inhaled and be hazardous to health. According to IQAir.com, as of Monday morning, Bangkok ranked 23 globally, with its air quality index logging in at 116. And right now we have Dr. Panithai Wattanayakon, who's the chairman PM Security Advisory Committee in the studio right now to discuss what is going on with the recent protests and what will happen to the national security in general.
So first of all, I have to ask you about the event yesterday. What do you see is different between this generation of protesters than before?
I think the concerns are now beyond political issues. I think it begins to move into the issues of changing or reforming major institutions in Thailand. I think this is an issue that the Thai people will have to discuss together, not only one or two groups. Politics comes and goes in terms of leadership.
Right.
But the institutions will stay.
Right.
So if you want to change certain things about institutions, major institutions in Thailand, from the top to the bottom, you need to engage more widely, more broadly. You need to be patient. You need to listen to different voices. Because in the end, it will send many waves to different institutions. So I think, but of course, young people, they speak their mind, so we need to listen to them. After all, they will be our future leaders or future generation. But the language, the tone is also unusual.
Right.
It's an angry tone, it's an alarming tone, it's a tone of disappointment, of many things in life. So I think young people are maybe now trying to tell you through this very intense verbal communications. Some of the older generations may not want to hear that tone,
Right.
or not willing to put up with that tone. But I think this is the time for changes. I think.
Some conservative group will say that what they are asking for change is a threat to national security. What do you think about that?
Well, there are some aspects of it. We are not so sure yet. So far, no one in a unified manner emerging at the national scene to sit and talk to the nation, to sit and talk to the different leaders. Some of the proposals to change or to amend the particular articles in the Constitution may lead into, in many people's mind, may lead into the changing of the forms of the government. And that is will be a major concern for some people who are thinking that this is constituting to instability of the system that, of course, you know very well, democratic system with the monarchy at the top, constitutional monarchy. So I think that is one concern. Traditionally, amendments are not going to be touched on these articles.
Right.
So that's one concern. The other concern is deeper than that. It deals with a way of life in Thailand. It's a cultural way of life. This country, this nation, formed many hundred years ago with institutions like the monarchy to propose changes in different pillars in Thai society. It means that to change the way of life for centuries. So it need to be discussed in a very serious manner, not on the streets.
Would you say that these cultural issues that have been going on for centuries have rooted the polarization between in Thai society between the anti-government protesters and the royalists? Would you say that?
Yes, in certain ways, I think somehow something happened in the internet world, linking
Something happened.
linking every issues into one or two major narratives.
Conspiracy theory?
Maybe that too. Conspiracy theories always receive more attention on the internet. Fake news travel much faster
And
louder and quicker than real news. But I think something not on the ground but on the air is happening to link these different issues into one issue. For example, issue of poverty and inequality. Now linked to one person.
Right. They link everything to one person.
Exactly. So that is quite interesting. It's a new phenomenon. It's not like we have seen before. So something is happening on air, something perhaps organized, a push, or maybe linked to certain narratives. And on the ground, it's different. You see Thailand dealing with COVID-19, it's not that bad at all.
Right.
Even we are not out of the wood yet, see. And also the impact of the economy is real, but still far better than many other countries.
True.
And if you look long enough, 5 years, 10 years, the gap in terms of poverty is now reducing. This is not according to me, this is according to major research organizations like TDI and others. They came up with but yet this is not perceived or received in online, in internet between young people. So something must be different for them. They may be concerned about other things rather than these facts or the issue that's happening on the ground. So what I'm trying to say is that changes perceived by young people and different other generation may not be the same. It's time
Right.
to sit down and exchange.
Would you say that the ongoing anti-government protests, what they've been demanding, made people overlook what they did right, meaning the government with the COVID-19 situation or the economy in general, all these things?
Well, yes, but I'm not so certain that they are interested in what have done right.
Right.
They are interested more in what have we done wrong.
Right.
So I think maybe government people should sit and listen to them more, and then try to explain to them how to engage, or try to persuade, or in many circumstances try to perhaps adjust, accommodate their demands. I think there's something that are real. For example, there are a lot of problems in school.
True.
If you are young today, you ought to be very worried. How are you going to cope with your new changes ahead, in the next few months, in the next few years? What is your career path? You don't even know with this situation.
And they are right that the education system in Thailand has been the same for I don't know how many years.
There are some good schools,
decades.
but in general,
Yeah.
we are lag behind. Look at the curriculum.
Right.
Put it in a more simple terms. The students seem to think that they are now knowing more than the teachers. They read more on internet. They spend more on reading new,
Right.
changes. And the teachers are still trying to teach them history, trying to teach them the success stories, which may not be accounted,
Right.
in the future. So that is a real problem. On top of the maybe old regulations about uniform code, hairstyle.
Maybe that's I personally think that the rule is there for keep people in check. But I think the way they're against the rule maybe is their way to say no to some certain command, that they want some freedom in certain
Exactly.
things.
And it will change. For example, at my university, at one time we used to regulate regulations on uniforms, and they don't like it, so we lift it up. And then you can see a lot of competitiveness in terms of dressing, in terms of fashion. And then they voted again that
Right.
to call back the uniform to code, because they said enough with the competitive on the free dressing code. So this issue comes and go, but my real concern is you need to accommodate and be more flexible. At a
Listen to
certain
them
time.
more.
Listen to them more, and then allow them. For example, in my class, before teaching, I ask them to vote on the way we teach, on the way we evaluate them, and ask them to participate in the teaching process in the beginning, and we voted as an agreement between the teacher and the students, and then we move on from there. So they like it, although we still their teachers, but we still need to give them grades. But they feel like they are in control of their own life, their own future, their own exams. So
There's more like engagement and involvement from the students, and teachers can actually move on with that so that they both agree on the same thing.
Yes. I think that's the key to the I think new society. Participation, in a more broader sense and deeper, meaningful sense is important in politics, in education, or even in the family. I think now the students are calling for a better participation. I think the system must accommodate that.
And you were talking about somehow everything linked into one person. Is it the case that they maybe all this frustration, they try to find one person that will be responsible, or they try to find someone accountable for everything that happened?
Well,
If they don't blame Prime Minister, who do you think they can, I don't know, put this?
well, they can blame their parents. We always do. We always do when we were young.
That's true.
And then you can blame your teachers also. But it's not fair. That is correct. But Prime Minister must, and I think he realizes that it comes with a job. Leadership must be blamed if something goes wrong in the country, although maybe you're not responsible for it. I remember reading the notes of President George Bush to the new coming president. He lost the election, and he said, "Well, good luck to you." I think Mr. Clinton, Bill Clinton, good luck to you. And then in many times, you feel that's not fair to you, but it comes with a job. You're responsible for it, and just be strong and move on, and committed to do the right things. I think that's what Prime Minister needs to do, to look ahead, and to make sure that Thailand moves ahead. We are now facing with the real recovery issues. I think this is a real test, for the Thai strength. In the next few months, if we can move and pull the society into the recovery process, that's one. Second, of course, a lot of changes in the international, arena. United States is now having a new president, perhaps.
Everybody is so positive about the change.
Yes, and then in Asia we have a rise of China, and we have rise of India soon, and then rise of Asia in general. You need to accommodate that. You see a lot of relocations of the supply chains to Thailand. You need to upskill the people. You need to make sure that you can accommodate these changes. So I think there are a lot of issues on top of the political participation, corruption issues, and the issues of how to reform different institutions, to accommodate more changes. But just one observation, for institutions that are very much lasting for centuries, you need to ask the question: what's the success story of those institutions that are able to stand throughout time? Reforms, changes within those institutions. So in a way, I think institutions that last that long, they have the capacity to reform anyway.
To withstand
changes. But it may not be fast enough for the young mind, but now time to talk, time to exchange in a more civil ways.
So from talking to you, and also actually a couple weeks ago, we also got the statement from a lot of communication academics. They asked that there should be a platform provided for these people to be able to voice their mind to the government. Do you think it's too late now? Because it seems like they get angrier and angrier every time.
Well, people who get angry can calm down too. If you engage in the right ways, to those people. I think a major platform is being now introduced. Reconciliation Council or committee is now being put together by perhaps different groups, including academic groups under the parliament. I think that's one interesting attempt. You may see a lot of different attempts to create different platforms to unify these different issues, demands, and concerns. And once everything is more stable, you can see different platforms emerging. In the meantime, you already have your own platform online.
All the social media.
24 hours a day. So this is something.
I think that is a source of their energy.
Yes, of
for
course.
the protest and everything.
Of course. You can protest 24 hours. You don't need to be online. You need to be on ground. You can protest online 24 hours.
And sometimes online can bring us a lot of pressure, and we can hear what they're actually saying. But back to the Thai protest, recently the police actually admitted that they did use chemicals in the recent protest last month. Do you think it's the right move, or is it way too late to make an excuse at this time?
Well, I think the use of this non-lethal equipment at that particular event must be evaluated. Lessons must be learned. Now, looking back, I think the police are now adjusting their measures. Yesterday, you saw the police using water cannon in the air, trying to not to aim into the people. I think that's a more appropriate thing to do, given the situation yesterday. I think we hope to see this more flexible, use of this equipments in a sense that to stop the escalation, but not to escalate, the situation like in the past few weeks. So I think lesson learned is very clear, and the more effective use yesterday seemed to be acceptable, and the police are now, I think, more ready to be more flexible, which is that's very good.
Another thing I want to ask is that in the past 10 years, 3 governments, we have numerous reconciliation panels happened, and I think it has not been any fruitful. Do you think this one that about to set up, can we hope for any kind of measures, or, I mean, if they propose something, it means government have to try to do what they ask, right, to make it work. So do you think it's going to turn to something constructive?
Well, you need to hope for, I think, this kind of talks. In the end, all battles will be concluded at the table, negotiation table. I think that's what I think we are aiming for. You need to be hopeful. Talk is good, at least among different people who have different ideas, but at first it will be difficult.
Right.
You can see it as struggling to come to the table. You can see as a struggling to set up a more acceptable mechanism to talk. But once you finish doing that, it may take time in the beginning. You may struggle to find persons to be acceptable to all. But once you have that table, lessons learned from all kinds of conflicts, it concluded with better outcome at the talking table.
But the protesters already say no to join the panel.
Pheu Thai party, at first they say no, but once they saw the usefulness of it, they said they changed their mind, providing that the mechanism that ensure their concerns. I think the student will also, in the next few weeks,
it will be best for them to join.
They will see usefulness of this, especially the moderate leaders who seemingly are now coming out, engaging with the debates in the different television talk shows and other places. I think this is very welcome. In the next few weeks, you may see universities hosting more talks, more debate rounds, and this week and next week there will be more major universities open up for more platforms. And then once people get into that, real issues will emerge. Emotional issue will be put aside, and then the real issue will emerge. And then you begin to work hard and long on these issues.
So how much hope do you have for the protesters, royalists, the government, and related parties to negotiate and compromise and find a common ground?
Well, you never give up hope, and in Thailand, we are able to manage to compromise. We are able to manage to come to the middle ground, and the Thai people ways of life is also middle ground, middle path. I think the time has come for these people to begin to move into that middle ground and trying to debate, engage. At the end, we hope to have a new constitution, perhaps a new election, the new government. In the end, we should also have a new map, a new blueprint for Thailand to recover after COVID. So I think that's just a major attempt. Simultaneously, you need to adjust the old system. You need to move into the new era of globalization after COVID. So you need to do a lot. No wonder the young students, young people are very concerned, because the challenge is unprecedented. And then we thought that 1997 economic crisis was bad enough. Now it's even far beyond what we experienced. So I think the impatience, the angry, the frustration, it all came out.
They want to see more action.
Yes. And as you said in the classrooms, let it out, let it out, as long as you don't destroy public properties, as long as you don't harm people's lives, as long as you don't violate other people's rights, that will be all right. We need to listen to that. But for the extreme voice, that will be dealt with laws and orders. You have mechanism to deal with those hate speech and all those already. So
I think those extremists somehow discredit the legitimacy of the other thing that really need to be changed or reformed.
I think that is, of course, a very right observation in many situations in many countries. But then again, at the beginning of the protest like this, the extreme voice are the loudest.
Right.
But as you move into the real issues, the moderate voice will take control, of the path, and then they'll be able to sit down and negotiate and talk peacefully. I hope that in the next few weeks, before we go into the new year, we could be able to see some of these issues emerging and some of the real leaders from both sides, or different sides emerging.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Patition, for joining us today. ขอบคุณมากค่ะ
ครับขอบคุณครับ
And that wraps up tonight's edition of Thai PBS World Tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. สวัสดี
สวัสดี
ค่ะ
ค่ะ